When I was growing up, everyone ran away from home at least once. Doesn't happen as much now because in today's world, you can't let your child go down the street. I was a mama's boy. I didn't like to spend the night at someone else's house, let alone run away. But one day, I'd had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I was leaving. I'm a middle child. As you know, the middle child has the most difficult road. Thank you, middle children. My older sister, Teresa, was smarter than me. If she and I got in an argument, Teresa could use her superior intellect and convince our parents it was my fault. If my younger sister, Angie, and I got in a fight, all she had to do was cry, and you guessed it, my fault. I was stuck between Einstein and Frankenstein. Middle child who couldn't win. On top of that, I was very sensitive. It bothered me if someone was angry, so I took blame to keep the peace. I can't even remember what it's about, but we got in a fight, and of course, it was my fault. Teresa was smarter, Angie cried harder, I got in trouble. I don't know what my punishment was, but I'm sure it was severe. I couldn't play with my G.I. Joes or watch TV, something cruel. So I went to my room, and I packed up my stuff to leave. I packed a book, because I didn't want to get bored while I was running away. A G.I. Joe, I'd show them. And my grandpa doll, because I couldn't sleep without my grandpa doll. Thank you. I was ready for life on my own. I wasn't exactly sure where to go, but Kenny and Karen Goose lived 2 doors down. I decided to start life on the run at their house, 2 doors down. Hardcore runaway. I got halfway there, which would be next door, and I couldn't take it anymore. Life on the run was way too scary. I ran home, burst in the front door, and ran to my mom, who didn't even know I ran away. That's it, my big story of running away from home, life on the edge. A lot of you have funny stories about running away, but there are also sad and tragic stories. For you, it wasn't packing a doll and a book to go next door. You really did it. Convinced things would be better, you left home and started running and discovered how wrong you were. Life on the run was filled with mistakes, failures, and regrets. Still hurts to think about. Life as a runaway is dangerous and uncertain. Today, I'm not talking about childhood runaway moments. Instead, I'm talking about people who make the decision to run away from their spiritual home, from God, their faith, and everything familiar. Jesus used stories called parables to teach important life lessons. In Luke 15, Jesus told 3 parables in response to a group of religious leaders criticizing him for spending time with sinners. The first was about a shepherd who went in search of one lost sheep. The second was about a woman who lost a coin and searched till it was found. The third story, most often referred to as the prodigal son, is a picture of what happens when you run from God. In this story, the father represents God, the sons represent us. As we go through the story, I'm going to use stories of friends who ran from God, who gave me permission to share their story, but I'm going to avoid their names because feelings are still raw. I think you'll see the parallels between their stories and the story Jesus told. Luke 15, starting with verse 11, Jesus said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." Dad apparently had quite a bit of money that when he died would be divided between his 2 sons. But the younger son, the Bible doesn't give him a name, but we'll call him Scott, was impatient. He didn't want to wait till his dad died. He wanted his share of the money now. In the culture of the original listeners, that was the ultimate insult. If a son asked for his inheritance before his father died, It was like wishing his father was already dead. I don't care if you live or die, I just want the money. The father couldn't force his son to stay or do right, so he divided the money and gave each of the sons their share. Scott got what he wanted, money. Not long after that, he got together all he had and set off for a distant country. This was more than just going to see the world. Scott abandoned the way of living, thinking, acting, and believing he'd been taught, everything his father stood for. Scott left home and all it represented for life on his own. He ran. Remember, Father represents God. Scott represents you when you run from God. I've been a pastor over 35 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of people make this same decision. I've watched students and young adults, mothers and fathers, even older adults, turn their back on God and run. I don't know every reason people run from God, but I've learned by listening to their stories. Some people run because God's boundaries feel like punishment or restriction. They don't want limits or rules. They want to do their thing their way with no disapproval from others. Other people run because they want to prove they don't need anyone or anything. They don't need anyone else's way or God's way. They want it their way. Still others run because disappointment with people leads to anger towards God. They respond to a deep or profound hurt by leaving God and everyone connected to him. It's misplaced anger as they decide mean, angry people represent God. I'm particularly hurt for these kind of runaways. Listen to what some of my friends say. When I was 16, my home church went through a church split. I was so disillusioned by the words and actions of people, I used that as an excuse to run from God. Another said some serious stuff came up in life, one of which was when my uncle, who was the biggest Christian I knew, failed miserably. That combined with a couple other events made me decide God wasn't worth following. Another one said, I basically put the blame on God because I was hurt. It wasn't necessarily intentional, but it's like it slowly happened. I became bitter. Some people run because of poor relationship choices. Foolish people convince them life on the run will be better. One of my friends wrote, I ran from God almost 3 years, the darkest time of my life. I started my senior year of high school, continued through some of my early college years. I fell victim to peer pressure and wanting to fit in. I did things because everyone else was doing them, or I thought it made me look cool. I convinced myself that my life was carefree and perfect when really I was depressed, spiraling out of control, and using whatever I could to self-medicate. I was in denial and in a toxic relationship that only fueled me to do more wrong. Sad stories. Some people run because they're lonely. It's not so much they're running from something, they think they're running to something. They imagine a new life filled with fun and friends. What they don't have seems better what they have. Fantasy trumps reality. Regardless of the reason, there's little as sad as watching someone run because you know where it's headed. You can predict the end result. Scott ran from his father. Looking at his story, we learn what happens when you run. Verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country. First consequence of running is you leave home. You say, come on, Rod, how obvious is that? Of course, if you run away, you leave home. That's the whole point of running. I know that doesn't seem like a consequence, but when you leave home, you also leave the safety of home. When you run from God, you take yourself out from under his hand of protection. Understand, it's not that God chooses to quit protecting you. Instead, you refuse his protection. When you run, you leave the safety of home and the protection of your heavenly Father. When you leave home, you also leave the security of home. It's a little more difficult to explain, but security is the feeling of knowing you belong, that you have a place to call home. Maybe I can explain it this way. Every time I travel to a foreign country, I feel just a little bit out of place, like I don't quite fit. Even though I'm careful, I don't feel completely secure. When the plane lands back in the United States, I breathe a sigh of relief. Feels good to be home, where I belong. When you run, you leave the security of home, the place you belong. You also leave the blessings of home. My sons are adults now, but growing up, I reminded them often there were blessings that came with living in the Loy household. I paid for their food. In Parker's case, a lot of food. Cindy did their laundry, a lot of it. I paid for their water, their electricity, their clothes, their gas. Cindy cooked for them. I let them watch my TV in my living room while they laid on my couch and breathed my air. If they decided to leave home, they knew the deal. The blessings stayed behind. The blessings didn't go with them if they ran. We still love them. But the blessings came because they lived by our rules in our home. We would be fools if we let them live their way by their rules and still gave them all the blessings of home. When you run from God, you run away from his blessings. He wants to bless you, but he won't. He can't. You choose to lose the blessings when you run. And finally, when you leave home, you run from the love of home. And don't get me wrong, God still loves you. You're just not there to experience it. I think of one girl who gave her life to Jesus in our student ministry. She had a horrible home and family. For the first time, she experienced unconditional love and acceptance. Years later, she made new friends who talked her into running from God, and now she's far from home and from that love. Now, do we still love her? Of course we do. She's just not here to feel and experience that love. When you leave home, you leave so much. Really, that should be enough to make you come home. Life without the safety, security, and the blessings and the love of home. But if that's not enough, when you keep running, the consequences continue. As we look at this story, you might recognize a pattern in your life. You might be early in the journey running from God. You need to know what to expect. Others of you will say, that's it. That's exactly what happened. That's what happened to me. Others of you might say, that's happening to me right now. It's a predictable pattern. You can expect it when you run from God. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and squandered his wealth in wild living. Scott's dad worked all his life for that money. Scott didn't invest it. He didn't save it. He squandered it in wild living. Scott didn't run away from home to become a rabbi or a missionary. He ran away to party. We don't know how long it took to lose everything, but apparently not long. And you look at him and say, well, that's not very smart. No, it wasn't, but it's a predictable part of the pattern. When you run from God, you make bad decisions. You do things you never thought you would do. You don't plan to make bad decisions. It's just one of the consequences when you run. I've seen it over and over in the lives of people who run from God. When they finally come back, they say, what in the world made me do that? How did I ever make that decision? Why did I ever marry him? Why did I spend so much money on that? When you decide to run, you're convinced it's going to be fun for everyone, but you make bad decisions and do dumb things. That's just what happens when you run. After he'd spent everything, Scott lost all the money. Again, it's part of the pattern. When you run from God, you lose. I've been reading stories from people who ran from God. One thing every story has in common, they lost. Some lost money. Some lost their families. Others lost marriages. Some lost their job or their career. Some lost businesses. Some lost friends. Others lost their innocence or their reputation. Over and over, their story is how much they lost. When you run from God, you lose. It's painful to watch. I cry over runaways and what their decisions cost them. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. In other words, he was hungry. This guy had no money. He'd never considered this possibility, but all his plans for fun and friends failed. That's what happens when you run from God. Your plans fail. Imagine using a paper map to plan a road trip. Now, I realize that I need to pause right there for those of you under 30. This is a map, not on your phone, but on a big piece of paper. This is a map of Arkansas. It's got a picture of the whole state. And then there's lines on the map that represent roads. A big, wide, bold line means that's a good road. A skinny little light line means you're stupid. That's not going to be any good. So you look at the map and you see I'm in Russellville and I want to go to Paragould. And then you start looking at the lines and you plan out which line you want to drive on. And every line has a number on it, and that corresponds to the number of the road. And there's road signs with the number of the road, and you match it up, you can drive. It's back before you had phones telling you turn left. You would just have this. It was amazing. The hardest part of paper maps, is when you had to fold it back up. No one knows how to fold a paper map. I practiced. A lot of husbands and wives had major fights over this right here. I still can't do it. Anyway, it's a map. And you see where you want to go, you highlight the route, but before long you encounter unexpected obstacles. You thought you knew what the journey would be, but you're met with detours and delays and challenging circumstances. The same is true in the life of a runaway. You may have it all planned out, but you don't see the dangers ahead. You think the path is clear and straight, but you're headed for pain and disappointment. When you're in the situation, you say, how did this happen? How did I ever become this? This wasn't my plan. But from the outside looking in, we say, how could that not happen? You left home, you ran from God. Every runaway thinks their story will be different. Learn from others. If I pass the mic around, former runners and people currently running would tell you it's not as good as it looks. It's sure not what I expected. When you run from God, it's inevitable. Your plans will fail. Relationship plans, financial plans, future plans. One day you'll look around and say, being pregnant, that wasn't part of my plan. Being broke, didn't count on that. Being addicted wasn't part of the plan. Being lonely wasn't part of the plan. I never planned it this way. You know, I've never met someone who said, I'm so glad I ran, everything worked out perfect. Some people blame God, but God didn't do this to you. Remember, you ran from his protection and blessing. That's just what happens when you run. I teach often that blessing follows obedience. This is the other side of it. Consequences follow disobedience. See, I want you to realize there's a connection between what is happening in your life and what you've decided about God. It is not coincidence. Scott was going to be rich and free, having fun with Dad's money. But all his plans failed, so he went out, hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs. Far from the comfort, security, and blessings of home, Scott got a job in a pig pen. How embarrassing. He was supposed to be special. Now he was with the pigs. When you run, you end up embarrassed and ashamed because you knew better. Most of the time, shame is the biggest hurdle for a runaway. I'd love to come home, but what will people think? What will they say? I've had the conversation so many times. Had it again just the other day. Pastor Rod, I'm just so ashamed. How could I have been so stupid? It may have been stupid, but don't let guilt and shame keep you away. You can't run forever. Come home. What will people think? People who are genuine followers of Jesus will celebrate, love you, and accept you. Forget about the critics and cynics who question your commitment, they need to find a hobby. Really, what they need to find is Jesus. Don't let mean, angry idiots who are really enemies of the church keep you from coming home. We don't listen to them. You shouldn't either. Overcome the embarrassment and shame and come home. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now, wait a minute. What happened to all the people who helped Scott spend his money? Where are all the people he partied with? Where are the people who got drunk with him? Where are they? What happened to Scott will happen to you. The people who get drunk with you don't want to detox with you. And the people who partied with you are soon nowhere to be found. And you find yourself alone. Maybe the story describes you. You left relationship with God and left home. When you did, you didn't realize the consequences, but you do now. Maybe you're all the way there, experiencing them all. Or maybe you're just starting to experience some of the consequences and you recognize, uh-oh, this pattern's me. I see where I'm headed. What do you do? What did Scott do? He came to his senses. What brought him to his senses was consequences, reality. He looked around at his situation, hungry and alone, feeding pigs. How could he not come to his senses? One of my friends said this. After 3 years, the guy I was with physically abused me terribly. I knew enough was enough. I'd lost everything, my faith, my schooling, my family, my drive, most importantly, my happiness. Living in a rundown apartment with a dead-end job and a car that wouldn't start, I decided to call home and plead for help and forgiveness. What will it take for you? How many broken relationships? How much do you have to lose? How many bad decisions? How many failed plans? Why not come home before it gets that bad? It's time.
I see that far away look in your eyes, a hurt and a hunger that I recognize. There's a void in your spirit that you can't disguise. A need for a place to call home. You're worn out and weary from running around, dreamless and restless, and you can't settle down, 'cause you're looking for something you just haven't found. Place for your heart to call home. You're longing for home. Dreaming of home. To drink in the love, to feel the embrace. Your heart needs a place to call home. In the quiet night, when you're finally alone, and you open a part of your soul. Oh, your homeless heart breathes out a prayer, crying out that there's God. Father's aware that you're struggling, so He's feeling your longing, and He wants you to know that there's something eternal engraved in your soul that calls you and beckons you home. He's calling you home. He's leading you home to drink in the love, to feel the embrace. At last, there's a place to call home. There's a place for your heart to call
When he came to his senses, Scott said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? Here I am starving to death. I will set out, go back to my father, and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. He made the decision, even if all I can do is get a job with Dad, it's better than this. I'm going home. I'm going back to the safety, security, blessings, and love of home. No matter how many bad decisions you've made or the consequences you've suffered, even if you're embarrassed and ashamed, you can always come home. Your biggest fear is, when I come home, when I return to God, what will He say? What will He do?" Let's jump ahead to verse 20 of the story. Well, he was still a long way off. His father saw him, was filled with compassion for him, ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. That's what God will do. That's what we will do. We will throw our arms around you and say, "Welcome home." No questions, no lectures, no interrogation, just welcome home. It's time to quit running. Would you please come home?